Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. I have like 25 minutes at least worth of slides and 15 minutes to talk. So I am going to talk very, very quickly. Probably not have a lot of time for questions, but if anyone wants to come and find me and discuss anything or get some more insights into anything I talk about, please feel free. So winning the narrative, why a brand needs more than a logo. Thanks for coming here from Glyph. Anyone who's working in marketing in our ecosystem probably saw this post by Jonathan Schwartz not long ago, where he said, Filecoin's fighting two battles, narratives and scaling paid storage deals. He says 95% of the conversations I have about Filecoin are about its narrative and not its ability to charge for storage. This is why narrative matters. When we talk about a brand, what a brand really is a kind of narrative device that we all agree to believe is true, right? There's the kind of physical world of trees, rivers, grass, all that stuff. And then there are all these narrative structures that we build on top of it, like countries, companies, those kind of things. And a brand is kind of a shorthand for one of those. I really like this idea from Sapiens. I know it's very cheesy to quote Sapiens, but this idea that like large numbers of strangers cooperate successfully by believing in common myths. To me, that's exactly what a good brand is. You know, that Apple logo in the top left corner, as soon as you see that, you tell yourself a story about two guys who were in a garage, maybe or maybe not taking acid and tinkering with bits of computer. And that story is so powerful that now millions of people like buy their products every day. People show up for work every day. People do what they're told every day because of the strength of that story. So how can narrative-driven branding be helpful to us? I'm not going to go through each of these, but if there's anything you take away from this, I want you to think about this idea of things being clear, consistent, and compelling. Good branding should clarify your message. It should help people to understand what you have to talk about. It should be consistent. I think this is actually the most important thing. And it comes back a lot to this conversation we have about things being ready, about whether things work or not, about whether things are easy to use or not. That's not the worst problem in the world. If you have a usability issue, if you have a thing that's not ready yet, as long as people expect it, it can even be a plus. It can be like, oh, wow, I'm getting to use this thing before anyone else has had a go, before it's even ready yet. And the last thing obviously is compelling. And this is something that we've discussed before as well, like the words decentralized storage don't always mean a lot to your grandma. So having a message that makes people care, right? And that focuses on why people should care about what you have to say. So there are two tools I want to run through really quickly that hopefully you can take away and use. One is the kind of anatomy of a brand, what a brand actually looks like. And the other is the anatomy of a narrative. And I'm starting with a narrative because I think all good brands should start with a good story. So this is a very, very kind of simplified narrative structure. There are many narrative structures. You could spend the rest of your life reading books about different types of story and how to write one. What really matters is not which one you use, but that you use one, right? Having a structure gives you clarity, gives you consistency. And that consistency, as we said, is what makes the experience of using your product and interacting with your thing coherent. So on a very simple level, you have the status quo, where people find themselves now. When we talk about meeting people where they are, that's using Telegram if necessary, right? The pain point. What's the thing that really motivates people? Pain is one of the few things that actually motivates us to do something. So what's the pain point that this person's experiencing? What's the challenge? How are they going to deal with that pain point? And what's the reward? What's the payoff that they get for when they've actually dealt with that successfully? And you can break this down. This is actually kind of simplification of the hero's journey, which has like between 12 and 16 different kind of stages. I like to focus on these four, but you can look at it as well as a writing tool, look a bit more closely where you have what excites someone, what's gonna hook them into wanting to use your product, what's at stake. So when we talk about the challenges of using something, what's the potential downside? What have they got to overcome? And then once they've dealt with their pain point, how does it affect them? How do they grow? And how does that affect the impact they can have on the world? So like not only how does it reward them, but how does it give them tools to achieve what they're really trying to achieve? That's the quickest I've ever explained that. I'm sure it makes almost no sense at that rapid pace. So again, I'm happy to look at it in more detail later, but I want to jump straight into the anatomy of a brand because I think this is kind of more useful. So I think when most people get the call of like, we need a brand, what they really hear is like this: I need a logo and I need a name. And great. If you really, really like lizards and you want a lizard for your logo and because you have a pet lizard, that's excellent. That makes you happy. But I always feel like there is a kind of a result to that where if people don't have a strong set of brand tools to use, they're kind of laying track as the train is running, right? It's not that your brand doesn't have a personality. It's that you're making up the personality on the fly. It's not that your brand doesn't have a vision. It's that you're making up the vision on the fly, right? So a better approach, you can still incorporate the things you love, but a better approach is to start with the brand strategy and then build the identity on top of that. So what does a brand strategy look like? Again, there are many, many frameworks. This is my framework. It's not the only one. There are plenty of alternatives. What's important is not that you use mine, it's that you use a framework of some sort, right? The one I like is to break down into vision, mission, and values. So the vision is why you exist. What's the greater purpose that you're working towards? The mission, what are you doing to contribute to that vision? How are you going to get there? And then finally, the values, this kind of set of guiding principles. Everyone says they know what values are. I actually really like this term for our industry because I think if you think of it as actually what do you value? What are the things that are important to you? And you can measure against that. So as an example of a kind of successful vision and mission and a set of values that work together, if you look at the brand Patagonia, we're in business to save our home planet. There's nothing in there about clothing, right? It has nothing to do with clothing. This could be the vision for a company that makes clothes, makes cars, runs recycling centers, right? What's important here is thinking about what's the end goal that you're trying to achieve. The tool that you have to do that with, that comes into play in the mission, right? So here, building the best product, cause no unnecessary harm, use business to inspire and implement solutions to the environmental crisis. The mission connects what you do every day with the outcome that you're trying to reach, right? We make products in order to achieve our vision. And their values, environmentalism, integrity, quality, and advocacy. What's useful here is by having a set of coherent values, they don't have to look at every post, every tweet, every image, every product and say, do I like this or not? Is this good or not? Right? They can look at it and say, does this demonstrate environmentalism? Does it demonstrate integrity? Does it demonstrate quality? Does it demonstrate advocacy? And so you detach yourself from this kind of like, do I like or not, which is always a fuzzy question. And you actually have a kind of list of things that you can go through. Once you have that, you understand who you are, where you're going, how you're planning to get there, and how you can tell that you're doing a good job. That's when the next level comes in. So a visual identity, the look and feel of your brand, personality and tone of voice. So how does it sound when you talk? And a name. If you don't already have one, now's a great time to come up with one. Again, what's important here is not, does the founder of Patagonia like this shade of purple or not? That's not how you make that decision, right? You have a brand strategy that tells you this is where we're trying to get, this is what we're trying to do. And now you can look back at each of these things. Does this combination of colors tell the story of how we're trying to get here? Does this typography tell the story of how we're trying to get here, right? And again, what's really important here is consistency. It's no good if your store has a different experience to your Twitter feed, has a different experience to your website, right? That creates it damages trust, essentially, right? People expect one thing and then they experience something else. The last part, which we absolutely do not have time to get into, is brand architecture and sub-brands. I think this is especially important in decentralized branding because brand architecture essentially is how do you define the relationships between brands? I think we suffer from a problem in our industry of I like to call it fractal branding, where like every project needs a new logo, a new name, a new team, a new color, and everything kind of looks disconnected to everything else. Brand architecture is not about telling other people what they get to do. It's about building pathways so that people can interact with your brand, essentially. That could be by creating other brands that fit together, or it could just be by, how do you co-brand something? How does that work together? There's many different ways to do it. Again, what's important is not that you do it the way I think is right. What's important is that you have a framework. So if you take one thing away from this, I want you to really think about, rather than looking at your work and thinking, do I like this or is this good? I want you to think about, is this consistent? Right? Do each of these touch points boost, amplify, reflect, agree with all of the other things that we're doing? And building these tools, thinking about your narrative, thinking about your experience, thinking about your brand strategy will give you a yardstick to measure against, right? The same with your vision, your mission, your values. Maybe you don't have the resources or the funding to do a kind of big in-depth brand strategy session with a huge agency. That's totally fine. Have an idea of where you're going, have an idea of how you'll get there, have an idea of how you'll measure success. And then each touch point of your brand, you can compare that against it. That's it. The last thing I wanted to say is, how can Filecoin Foundation help? We are a small creative team at the foundation. There's only a few of us. As much as we love drawing logos and it makes us very happy, we're not unfortunately equipped to kind of do that for everybody who comes to us. But what we are equipped to do is to give a lot of guidance into how to manage these projects. Also how to tell if the project's going well, like if you need input on how something can be improved or how something can be more effective. Another thing that we do is provide tooling. Because we're a small team, because we operate in a decentralized ecosystem, our kind of core design philosophy is to build good tools and give them away. So if you have a need for something, maybe someone else has a need for something. Maybe we can help you make it, give it to everyone else, and lift the bar for the entire ecosystem. And finally, we can connect. Even if we're not able to solve your problems directly, we have good people. We have affordable people. We have people you can work with who can help you. So please feel free to reach out, design@phil.org, or find us through Slack. Thank you all very much.